Would that be okay? All right.
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. Thank you so very much, everyone, for being here this afternoon. This will be our last research conversations of this semester. Um, in spite of all that is going on at the federal landscape, we are very, very grateful for how our faculty members have risen tremendously, excellently to the task of continuing to write competitive proposal and looking for alternative sources of funding. I'm actually so pleased that regardless of what might be going on federally, we are not behind as a college in terms of requests for dollars and even proposals that have been funded. What an exciting afternoon today to have a Spencer Foundation type of practical workshop. Dr. Hannah Marie Guerrettaz and Dr. Angel Sobatta rather would be talking to us today about writing Spencer research grants, and they would be both Anna Marie and Angel will be giving us practical tips on how to write a successful Spencer proposal. We did not just pick on these two people, not only because they are great faculty, indeed, they are great faculty, great addition to our faculty base, but we tapped and picked on them because they have experience not only writing Spencer research proposals, they have actually won. Anna Maria has won 2 Spencer grants, and Angel has won 1. Together, collaborative one with Angel and Anna Marie together. So they will be able to share their wealth of experience with us today. For those who do not know, Spencer Foundation is a highly prestigious foundation grant. It's a prestigious funder of innovative educational research, offering grants from 50,000 to 3.5 million. They have both secured a small research grant and research to practice partnership grant from Spencer. I do, and I know they will have acknowledgement. There's a number of people who are also connected to this work that they would, Dr. Sherwood, Ms. Webb, Ms. Tipizewin, and the next first language program teachers. Thank you so very much to everyone for being connected to this important work. Dr. Anna Marie Guerrettaz is an associate professor of language literacy and technology at WSU. She pioneers research in 2 general areas of educational linguistics, including studying language teaching materials, for example, textbooks and teacher-created materials, and how they are deployed in classroom interactions, as well as indigenous language planning and bilingual education. She earned her PhD in second language studies at Indiana University. Dr. Angel Sobatta is an assistant professor in cultural studies and social thought in education, also at WSU. She is Nimipu, the people and the Next Best Tribe citizen. Dr. Sobatta has taught Nimipu language and stories at the Next Best language program and at the Next Best branch of the Northwest Indian College, Lewis Clark State College, University of Idaho, and WSU. She also teaches indigenous research methodologies and methods for the cultural studies and social thought in education program. Angel is a recent winner of a Humanities Washington Stories Fund grant. She earned her MA and EDD at the University of Idaho. So we are fortunate to have these great scholars here today as our speakers. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Anna Marie Guerrettaz and Dr. Angel Sobatta. And thank you so very much to everyone for being here. Over to you, Hannah Marie and Angel.
Thank you so much, Shola. And thanks, Kira and Shola and Laura and the Research Advisory Committee for inviting us today. Angel and I, we really value all of our colleagues, so all 20 or so of you. We're just very grateful to be able to share with you. So thank you. And we genuinely hope that this presentation will be helpful practically as you think about or write your own Spencer proposals. Okay, and please stop me if there's any issues with the visual or the sound. Okay. So just as a caveat, I'm not speaking today on behalf of Spencer. Like we have not, or neither Angel or I have shared this presentation with Spencer, just from our own personal experience. And also, we have a lot of different folks here in the audience. So some of you will have more grant experience than perhaps Angel and I. So we're trying to reach the kind of broad spectrum of folks. So forgive me or forgive us if some of the things I'm presenting seem basic. I'm going to start out here with the presentation. I'll try to move kind of quickly, but feel free to interrupt, please, like conversationally if anything is unclear, or if you have questions. And then Angel is going to finish the presentation component by sharing some of her experiences co-authoring the most recent Spencer grant together. Okay, so interrupt if you have questions. So as Shola mentioned, there are 2 Spencer grants that we have won, and that we're going to talk a lot about our experiences and what we've learned in writing and winning those awards. So the first is what Spencer calls the Small Research Grant. That's the title of it, Small Research Grant, $50,000. That was a study that started in 2019. And I was PI with 2 co-PIs, one at WSU, one at Denison University. And then the second grant that we won most recently was the Research Practice Partnership Grant. That's what Spencer calls it, or RPP for short. And that's a $400,000 award. And that's the grant that Angel and I are co-PIs on, along with Trina Webb, who's a teacher or was a teacher at the Nez Perce Language Program. So that's our active grant. So about Spencer Foundation, I really appreciate Shola's description. That was very helpful. I actually went back to the Spencer website. So in their words, because I think, many of us know who Spencer is, but trying to understand them like really profoundly so we can win money from them is a different story. So I tried to capture a few quotes about their work and their foundation that I feel like really capture my experiences applying for grants with them. So they say on their homepage, the goal of all our research grants at Spencer is to support rigorous, intellectually ambitious, and technically sound research, scholarship that develops new foundational knowledge that may also have a lasting impact on policymaking, practice, or educational discourse. And then from their grants overview website, where they just describe all their grants, their research grants in particular, they're interested in grants that address what they say that are the most pressing questions in education. They like to fund creative and open-minded scholarship, deep inquiry, robust research questions, and education research that cultivates learning and transforms lives. So how do we understand that? So that's great, right? All that's great, but kind of the way I interpret that, based on my work with them, how I understand Spencer grants is that they want to fund research that has practical educational implications. So practical research that's also rigorous, cutting edge, and makes a scholarly contribution to the broader discipline. So for example, my discipline is language education, right? So they would want research that's both practical and also makes, a significant, I would imagine, contribution to language education, or, if your field is science education or special education, right? So Spencer also champions research with social impact, like broadly conceived social impact, including diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Unlike some of the federal grants right now. But also, they're interested in social impact more broadly, societal betterment. I believe for a while, I don't know if they still have a grant focused on civil discourse, something along those lines. We talked about reciprocity, even in my first grant focused on Spanish. they're very interested in learning, right? Learning advancements, teacher workforce, and capacity building. So this is kind of a quick overview from their website, not comprehensive, but trying to give a taste. In case it's useful to those who have other grant experiences, I thought I might kind of offer again my anecdotal, personal experiences of how my sense is that Spencer might compare to other funding agencies. And this is primarily based, I've only been part of one federal grant, the Caminos grant from the United States Department of Education. So I'm speaking of my specific experience there. And I'm curious if folks who have more experience, if this rings true or not for you. Um, but my sense is that the US Department of Ed federal grant that I've been involved in, there's a really, intentional, strong focus on implementation and evaluation of an educational innovation. And that was kind of different for me, wonderful, but just different because my experience began with Spencer. And Spencer is really just about the research. And, they describe it as foundational research. Um, and then another kind of my personal anecdotal sense of how Spencer might compare to some federal grants, such as Department of Ed, in terms of types of research. Again, this is anecdotal. um, my sense is that federal grants sometimes are in education, really strongly favor quantitative research with some, secondary interest increasingly in qualitative. Spencer, based on my experiences and conversations with others, definitely, of course, values quantitative, but I think they might be a little bit more inclusive maybe of qualitative research as well. And I have question marks there because that's just my impression. Based on my experiences though. So, okay, so let's get into some of the tips. And again, please, I don't know if anyone has questions at this point that I can clarify, or if not, I can keep going. Okay, so I'm going to focus a lot on tips for folks writing Spencer grants. So really years and years before winning or being awarded the first Spencer grant, and this is maybe basic for some folks, but maybe important for others who are building their grant record. So it seemed important in my experience to build a track record, starting with smaller grants early on, like internal grants, both as a graduate student for those who are graduate students and as a faculty member. Also, a big shout out to the College of Education, Sport and Human Sciences and WSU for some really awesome and very, very helpful and transformative grant writing training over the years that I've been very grateful to benefit from. I don't know if these still exist, but maybe something similar. So there was, when I was starting out as an assistant professor, there was a full semester introductory work grant writing series through, I think, Orso. Also a day-long workshop through a private company called Grant Writers. So I would recommend all of these. I feel like a lot of what I was able to apply to writing a successful Spencer came from some of these workshops. Also, I was really grateful the College of Ed, before I wrote my first Spencer grant, or while I was writing it actually, I was able to participate in a semester-long individualized intensive grant writers coaching. And then there's other ongoing events through WSU as well that I mentioned in 4 and 5 there, like community engaged research program was wonderful, especially for the Spencer Research Practice Partnership Grant. But I think this is the same content, but just highlighting those first 3 workshops I thought were especially, I think, kind of lay foundational groundwork for any faculty member, that's really serious about wanting to learn how to write grants. Some anecdotal observations again, but I think there might be something to this because I've heard more senior mentors who have gotten a lot of grants discuss this as well. Interdisciplinary proposal successes for Spencer. So I should backtrack here, but so one of my mentors when I was writing our first successful Spencer grant encouraged me to connect with experts very relevant to the grant as co-PIs to potentially be a co-PI in our grant. And that worked for us. And then as I reflected and looked at other proposals, I realized this is a bit of a pattern. So there's 5 funded Spencer proposals that I'm familiar with from mentors or my own proposals. And I noticed that most of them, so Spencer is education research very solidly, but I noticed that a lot of these successful proposals included a disciplinary expert co-PI, like outside of or at the periphery of education, specifically in my experiences, linguistics, faculty history, Native American studies. Shout out to Angel. And then the 2 proposals that I'm very familiar with that did not have interdisciplinary co-PI teams were from like really senior world-renowned scholars and or out of with PIs at like a very, very prestigious place. That aren't as good as WSU, but okay. So I guess my concrete suggestion there is you might think about if you're submitting to Spencer, whether it is appropriate to have a co-PI who's a disciplinary expert. And this kind of goes back to Spencer's emphasis on what they would call foundational research. In terms of, so kind of switching gears in terms of writing the grant, and I think we hear this a lot from our amazing supporters in the ADR office, right? Resubmission is key. So both the funded grants that we were awarded were resubmissions. So our first attempt was, well, as they call it, denied or declined. And again, this might be kind of basic for some folks who have a lot of experience, but starting early, revising frequently is really key. Also becoming like truly an expert on the grant proposal instructions from Spencer. It takes time, but really worthwhile. Like there were like 3 different guides we used in our last Spencer grant, like 60 pages of instructions. They have like the core request for proposals, and then they have a bunch of supplementary guides like gosh, I don't know. I'd have to look back, but I know one of them, they had a supplementary guide just for the research practice partnership grant. And then of course, getting feedback early and often. So this is just as, if not more valuable in my experience than the grant workshops I mentioned. So Laura Girardot and Jason Johnson, right? Some heroes in our college. And then just anyone that will read my grant, I'll ask them to read it. Senior faculty. We used to have in the Office of Research, Esther Pratt, I don't think she's there anymore. She was the foundations expert. Friends, like, layperson, spouse, whatever, right? They can all provide good feedback. Okay, so any clarifications that anyone would like thus far? If not, we'll keep going. Okay, so next, looking at the proposal itself that we submitted, they're the 2 that we submitted that won 2 Spencer grants. I'm going to focus on from here out before I turn it over to Angel. So the grant proposal itself, and these are things I've learned from others, for sure. So I don't know if she's here, but Amy Roth McDuffie, I learned so very much from her when she was ADR when I did my first grant. So this knowledge comes from a lot of different people who've been mentors to me and to us. So grant proposal document basics, right? So again, some of it might be basic for a lot of you, but maybe more new for others. So trying to use the language or terminology of the grant instructions or the Spencer Foundation as much as you can, authentically in your proposal, right? So for example, in our research practice partnership grant, they use a lot of language in the call for proposals about practices and processes, policies, capacity building. So when there was a chance for us to use those meaningfully, we did, right? Especially in our research questions and abstract or summary. I've in both proposals that were funded, gave so many specifics, right? Showing that you have a really good plan, even if it's just your, example plan. So for example, specific timelines, specific research sites, specific participant numbers, right? So just very, very, sort of feels like after you've written the grant, you could just go do the research tomorrow, right? Because it's so well planned out. One helpful tip that Laura gave us was to, especially if it's a big project, to give the project an impactful name. I never would have thought of that. You kind of, it's like, oh, this doesn't exist yet, but give it a name, right? Because like Laura told me, and I agree with this, it projects confidence, right? And I think it gives the project significance. Like, so some examples, the Caminos grant, like that's the name that was put in the proposal. Or Angels in my grant is called Project Himyanawit, which means kinship, signifying kinship between the university and the tribe. Angel, I don't know, I always feel bad saying words that I might be pronouncing wrong. So we're so grateful that you have your Nimiputemt knowledge if you want to correct my pronunciation of Himyanawit. I'm also putting Angel on the spot there, so. Oopsies, okay. All right, and everyone can hear me still, is that right? Okay, good deal, okay. Also some grant proposal document basics. So when you're, oops, excuse me, I went backwards. Oh, this is the really key one. I would say including a dissemination plan. This is what, I'm sure this was in the grant workshops that I was at, but the time that this was drawn to my attention that really stood out to me was when the foundations expert Esther Pratt at WSU, she said you really have to include a dissemination plan. In the small research grant and then the RPP grant at Spencer, we did this at the end of our narrative. So like, what does that mean? So here's an example from the 2019 grant, small research grant. This is dissemination plan table. And I've always done this as a table. Helps it, I think, be clear and to stand out, right? So we're very specific. We're listing high impact journals and conferences that we're going to disseminate our research at. We're listing specific submission dates, specific subtopics, and other information, right? So dissemination is, right, essentially publishing, presenting, and maybe teacher training, right? So we had a research consortium to pilot a typology from the grant, a workshop at a national teacher conference, a roundtable at a national research conference, another presentation at a very different audience. We thought about different audiences here. That was pretty important. And then specific journals. Another great tip I got from a mentor writing the first grant was to strategically scale up research. Why would that be? To make it more competitive. Scaling up, ostensibly makes it more impactful. So for example, this in the first grant, at first I thought, well, we were studying Spanish as a foreign language classrooms. And I was like, well, I guess we'll study them here in Pullman. And one of my mentors said, well, why don't you just go 5 miles over to Idaho and include another state, right? A second site. And then we had a co-PI from a different region. So that allowed us to create a third region. So we had 3 different national regions, even though Moscow and Idaho are close together. You could call them different regions. So it was, actually a lot easier than I had ever thought to make a national research proposal. General readability, again, these were drawing on tips that I received from mentors over the years in writing the Spencer. Making the proposal really, as easy as possible for reviewers to read. So having lots of space. So not trying to cram in, we all want to say as much as we can. And this was actually from one of the grant writers workshops where they said it's really off-putting for reviewers. They don't necessarily kind of like a lot of things, they're busy people, right? So if they feel like it's not this dense thing that they have, that it's kind of more welcoming. So I thought that was an interesting insight. Another mentor has suggested avoiding acronyms, which I've always done, right? And the reason is that's hard for reviewers to remember, so it makes it harder to read. And then using consistent terminology. So little things that I didn't think were such a big deal in my first one, like pedagogical materials, teaching materials, language teaching materials. I would kind of use them interchangeably. And one of my mentors said, well, no, just try to stick with one, right? And then also precise use of theory and jargon. I was surprised a little bit in my first rejection from Spencer, how like tuned in the reviewer was to theory and kind of took me to task the first time that I wasn't using the term, a specific term accurately. Um, again, making it readable for reviewers, your proposal. I've heard from a couple different folks who've had successes with grants, and I've done this in our own proposals, to use whenever possible or whenever it makes sense to use easy to read tables and figures. Again, it can be more appealing to a reviewer, right, than just lots of text. Um, I use figures and tables a lot to really highlight, draw attention to key information in the grant. Sometimes it can help with word count, and a lot of these will create from scratch. So for example, in the small research grant that we were awarded, it was a 10-page narrative. We had 5 figures, 6 tables. In the 25-page narrative that Angel and I co-authored, I believe we had 5 figures and 5 tables just in the narrative, but we had a lot of appendices. So example of content that we've included in our successful proposals are coding schema, visuals of pilot models, overview, like really basic things like overview of the amount of data we're going to collect, researcher roles, contributions, illustrations of key concepts, really practical stuff like overviews of research sites, etc. So this is an example where rather than putting in paragraph form, so this is expected contributions from the first grant, the small research grant focused on Spanish. Rather than put in like paragraph form, this is what the 3 co-PIs are doing. Putting in a table is visually appealing and clearer. Another more complex table from that funded grant is our coding schema. And this is also from the first grant. We presented data and findings from a pilot study that we'd done, sort of proof of concept. It's kind of a complex visual, so I don't know that we need to walk through it, but right, the idea is it's pilot study data and proof of concept. And then, right, like figures can also be just really powerful. And Angels in my current grant, we included this map of tribes in the US Northwest, which really, I think, powerfully communicated to reviewers that land was very important intellectually and ethically in our grant. We had to kind of create our own because we didn't exactly have a map that had all the information we needed, or we didn't create our own, I should say, we added to it. And I think I might stop there because I want to, some of this I'll just do this really quickly. The Spencer portal, just a heads up, it has a very nice interface, but it is kind of, it's time consuming and there's a lot of steps. So I would say start early with that. Especially because it has some things that aren't in the RFP. So, but I'm gonna stop there and turn it over to Angel if she wants to add anything. So.
Okay, Katsia, thank you very much, Anne Marie, for all of your hard work and the presentation that you put together. Just really brings me back to when we were working together on creating this grant, and just the amount of work Anne Marie did for this was really uh, a lot. And so we just really thank you for that. And so my role, I guess, in these grants, because I was part of I've been working with Anne on a few different projects, and one was the 10K RA. That was a different grant, but it did help establish our relationships, and TPZ was part of that, along with Yvonne Sherwood. And that was part of their first introduction into meeting the people at the Nez language program. And so a lot of the work that we're doing is to establish the relationships between the tribes and the Nez tribe, and specifically, since that's who we are serving. And it was important for me as a Nimipu scholar who's a Nez citizen, enrolled citizen, and also a Nimipu scholar. I use the word Nimipu more so than Nez because Nimipu means the people. But to know that the WSU is seated on our sits situated on our land, our traditional land, and has, the land acknowledgement in place, and also the MOUs with the tribes, including the Nez Perce tribe. And so I really wanted to make sure that the work that I'm doing is really aligned with strengthening the land acknowledgement and the MOUs, so that they're just not mere words, but they're really put into action. And so also, in considering this grant, we really tried to look at different ways of approaching it through a qualitative method. And the qualitative methodologies that we're using is the Indigenous research methodologies and methods, which a lot of it has to do with what Sean Wilson and others term as the 4 Rs, and there's other different Rs: respect, relevancy, relationality, reciprocity. And so the reciprocity and relationality are really, really, really big. And so there was, key things that I helped Anne put into the narrative that had to do with the Indigenous research methodologies, because she, wasn't as familiar with that as with my experience. And I'm still learning as well. But I used a lot of those methodologies in my dissertation. And so the relationship, very important, as I stated, and that started early and it was consistent and continuous, where Anne Marie, TP Zewin, Yvonne, and myself being from here, we'd gather with the people we were going to meet, not only the Nez Perce Language Program people, but the Circle of Elders, which is a group of 9 elders that we meet with, and kind of review our plans and get their approval. And then when the grant is all ready to submit, we have to get approval from the Nez Perce Tribe Cultural Resources Program, and we submit to the Natural Resources, which is in the Nez Perce Tribal Executive Committee. We have to submit there for our cultural research permit and approval. And then we also presented in front of the full NEPTIC, Nez Perce Tribal Executive Committee, the 9 members, just to really, create that relationship so that they're familiar with who we are and the work we're doing and how it's serving the people. And so those were some of my main roles on that aspect, and also too with my years of experience with the Nez Perce Language Program. I've written grants that were funded by the ANA, Administration for Native Americans, and also some smaller grants, Potlatch Fund, just local granting agencies, but also was reviewer for the Potlatch Fund for language grants, and also a reviewer for the Administration for Native American language grants as well. And so that really kind of helped me add to the project, because there's a lot of similarities in it. And so I feel like I was really, I think, helpful from being an insider outsider, because I'm here with the language program and also here with Washington State University, and but just really strengthening that relationship. And it's exciting to me that what we're building on with this grant is really going to serve our people, and I think it's going to be something that we can be proud of, and that other people will be able to learn from. And so working with our communities, again, just reiterate the importance of that relationship and respect and the reciprocity, always giving back, and that the what we're going to collect for our data, it's not just WSUs, it's the tribes, and that's out of respect and reciprocity, because so much has been taken from us, from our knowledge systems. And so just really grateful for Spencer for allowing us to be able to apply for this and this reward of the grant. We're just working hard on it. And so I think I covered most of the areas that I set out to do in my mind, and I hope I'm not missing anything. So if you have any questions, just feel free to ask. See out, y'all. Thank you.
Anne Marie and Angel, thank you so much for your presentation. We'll open the floor. If Anne Marie, if you want to take down your share, that way we can see everyone who's here, and we'll open the floor for some questions from the audience. I could kick us off with one. You shared about the idea of alignment to granting agencies, and um, that's so key. I struggle though sometimes reading an RFP or reading about a foundation and say, how do I know if it is aligned? Do you have strategies or tips that you've done to know the idea that you're thinking about? Does it truly align? Yeah, anything that you might offer people when they're thinking about that critical key aspect of grant writing in alignment.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say with Spencer, I mean, one thing is that they do have a number of different grants. So if you have an idea, anyone here, there's a number of different options at Spencer. So you might take your idea and think about just, maybe at first intuitively what fits best. Like for example, the small research grant, like in my experience and my understanding, that's your idea. Like you have a research idea that you feel like makes an important contribution to the discipline, and that has practical, maybe long-term implications. So, if you have a great research idea, then probably the small research grant is a good place to start. Um, and they do have a number of other grants. Obviously, the Research Practice Partnership is the grant that Angel and I have. Um, and honestly, that one, it's funny because they say this is one of the hardest grants to write. And that was maybe because they have 60 pages of instructions. Um, so, but I did actually feel like the instructions were helpful in figuring out that alignment. And I think honestly, like going through the rejection process first was helpful. You get that
Yeah.
feedback. But
Rejections are so key to grant
yeah,
writing, I think.
right.
Actually, they're really good.
Yeah.
Have
And,
you
and
had any? Oh, sorry. Did you go
I was
ahead?
just gonna say, I feel like Laura is very helpful, right? So one of the things Laura does is she'll read and give really amazing feedback. Laura's always so helpful. Well, so Laura is just amazing, right? So I feel like when I've written grant proposals that Laura's helped me with, oftentimes we'll kind of start with a conversation
Hmm.
with maybe no funding agency in mind. And then Laura and I will kind of talk through and narrow it down. I hope I'm not giving you more work, Laura. Um, and then so that's kind of one strategy, right? Those conversations with an expert like Laura. And then when Laura has looked at my grant, she's very helpful about saying like, oh, you're talking about this. This is really the same thing that Spencer or the, RFP calls that. So just maybe think about that,
Right.
right? I don't know if
Yeah.
that answers your question, Kira.
Yeah, no, it does. I'm also curious if you've had did you have any conversations with program officers
Ooh.
maybe to help with that? Um, or were there any touch points that you can talk to us with the actual foundation that you thought were helpful, or were they detrimental?
I tried not to bother them, honestly.
Okay.
I don't know if that was a good or bad strategy. Except when we had this Angel, so an Angel, I don't want to talk the whole time if you have things you want to say in response to Kira, but no pressure, obviously. When we had kind of a curious situation with Angels and my first research practice partnership submission where we got perfect scores, but it was denied. So we did ask for
Yeah.
a conversation then. Very politely, obviously. And
Yeah.
first we were like, Shola, does this seem reasonable? And,
Mhm.
so that was the only time, but that's sort of an unusual situation. So,
Yeah, I found that sometimes trying to set up a meeting with a program officer with an idea or one pager in mind has been helpful in thinking about, what do they feel is alignment to
sure.
either, their area if they're a federal agency or Spencer if they, does it meet the goals
Right.
of their funding portfolio. Sometimes it's been hit or miss if that's been helpful. It really depends on the program officer, I would say, and how much they're willing to share. Some are a little bit more reserved, and others are like, yes, and do this, this, and this, right? Or pivot here. So it really depends.
That's
So
very helpful, Kira, because I kind of, you've had more grants than I have, so I'm always learning, and maybe that's a better strategy. Because I will say, when we did have that conversation, Angel and Yvonne and I, we had the first research practice grant rejected with perfect scores. They did actually cue us in, and very specifically to the alignment, and they said,
yeah,
a lot of this grant is also about researching the partnership itself.
yeah.
And that was for me, that like a light bulb went off, and that ended up being one of our three major research objectives in our revised proposal. So probably it would be good to have more conversations than I've had with program
Yeah.
officers.
That's great. And look, does anyone else have any questions?
For me, not a question. I just wanted to build on this discussion about when do you speak with a program officer or how do you speak with a program officer. I mean, I remember in that case when Anna Marie came and sent that email to us that, hey, perfect score, but no funding. That's strange. How do you
What
get
Angel and I thought.
how do you get a perfect score and no funding? I think the first thing we told her was you need to get a meeting together with a program officer. There are times that there may not be a need to speak with a program officer. Take, for example, if the scores were just not good, or if your proposal was triaged, I mean, didn't even make it to the panel, like at a federal panel, or if it made it to a panel but rated not competitive, and you could see the ratings and the distribution of ratings across different categories, maybe broader impact and intellectual merits, and they are rated poorly. There's just no point seeking a meeting with the program. So, I mean, they will provide feedback. But when you sit at a competitive edge and yet you were not funded and you were looking at something to make you cross that success line, that is a great time for me when I seek meetings with program officers. I also like meetings with program officers when I just want to know about the direction of the program. I mean, federal, I mostly do NSF. If I don't know, I mean, like now, there's a lot of push about AI. If I have a proposal that is not really called AI, I might be wondering, would this hit it? Is this what this program interested in? So very early, even before developing the full proposal, when I think that was what Kira was talking about also, the one pager where you have the big picture of what you want to write or do in the proposal, that is always a good time to also meet with the program officer when you have not spent like 3 months developing the proposal. And they're always very helpful to let me know that, if you are thinking along that line, this is not a good program. Why not try this other program? It will be very, more closely aligned with the vision that I had. So I just wanted to contribute to that discussion.
Yeah. Thank you. It's so key to that alignment. I think it's the first, right? It's the first door open, right? Because if you haven't hit alignment, the door isn't open for your grant to even be reviewed. And oftentimes those are triaged really quickly out.
Right.
So I think that, thinking about alignment to the funding agency is really key. Another question I had is, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and Angel might correct me if she thinks differently, but I do feel like that is, there were things that Angel and Yvonne and Native programs at WSU really wanted to do. And then there were things that Spencer wanted us to do, essentially, right? So with the alignment, like that research, we're not doing anything we don't want to do, but we have at least maybe one research objective that we wouldn't have had if Spencer wasn't like that put us
Right.
in the running for the grant. Like we might not have the grant
Yeah.
without it. So we were kind
Yeah.
of flexible, right, in some ways.
Yeah, and it's really good to be able to modify your idea or shape it in a way that meets both your needs as a researcher and desires as well as the funding agency. That's really critical. Well, I think I have one last question unless someone else has a question. I don't want to steal all the time. All right, so my last question, Anne-Marie, is thinking about reading. You talked about in both proposals, the first round was rejected. Now, the perfect score and rejection, totally odd. But the first one where you maybe didn't have perfect scores or you got reviewer feedback, did you have any strategies for looking at the feedback and trying to prioritize what would change? Maybe it was misalignment and it's like not a go, you're not going to resubmit at all. What was your process in thinking about looking at those reviews and altering your proposal based off of them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I will say the reviewer feedback was very helpful.
Mhm.
And so part of the strategy was just really thoughtfully uh, addressing their concerns. And even if it was like a major change, like
Mhm.
for that small research grant that I had from Spencer, um, it was kind of a bit of a whole year like intellectual exercise of like, so for example,
Yeah,
I remember they didn't like the theory that I was presenting because it's a research grant, right? So they want
right.
theory. And I was at conferences talking to scholars I respect about the theory. Um,
Mhm.
so that's, just one example, but I mean, I really took their feedback very seriously.